The front desk agent typed my name once. Prolled. Typed it again. And then she looked up at me with that careful smile. The one people use when they're about to wreck your day but don't want to be the one who did it. "I'm showing 2 reservations under Harmon," she said. Gerald and Diane Harmon in Suite 112, and Amber and Tyler Weston in Suite 114. I set my rolling bag down on the marble floor and stared at the screen she'd turned toward me. 2 rooms. My parents in one. My sister and her husband in the other. My name? Not there. I pulled out my phone and called my mom. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I could hear my sister Amber laughing at something in the background. That easy, carefree laugh that meant everyone was already settled in and comfortable without me. "Mom," I said. "There's no room booked for me." There was a pause. Kind of pause that tells you everything before a single word comes out. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice going soft and cheerful at the same time. "I figured you'd sort it out. You're so good at handling things." She said it like it was a compliment. Behind her, I heard Amber ask Tyler whether the hot tub on the balcony was big enough for 2. "My name is Serena Harmon. I'm 34 years old. I'm a senior data analyst at a logistics company in Austin, Texas. And my family planned a 4-day trip to Sedona, Arizona, one of the most packed travel destinations in the country during October, and they did not book a single bed for me. Not forgot. Did not book. Because forgetting looks different. Forgetting comes with a gasp, a scramble, someone falling over themselves to fix it. This came with a laugh, and then Amber asking about the hot tub. And I promise you, within the next 72 hours, every single person in that lobby was going to wish they had booked that room. Welcome back to silent revenge. If your family has ever treated your independence like permission to leave you out, if they've confused you being capable with you not needing to be loved, this story is yours. Drop your city in the comments. And stay with me because what happens at Thanksgiving will absolutely blow your mind. Before I tell you what happened, I need to tell you who I am. 'Cause this story only makes sense once you understand the gap between how my family saw me and who I actually was. I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, the younger of 2 daughters by 4 years. My sister Amber was the one the family centered on. Not because anything was wrong with her, just because she was louder about needing things, and my parents had figured out a long time ago that giving Amber what she wanted immediately kept the house calm. I was the one who didn't push, so I was the one nobody pushed back for. I put myself through Arizona State on an academic scholarship and a part-time job at a campus print shop, 20 hours a week between classes. I graduated at the top of my class with a degree in business analytics. My family didn't come to the ceremony. Not one of them. My college roommate Priya drove 3 hours from Phoenix and screamed my name so loud the woman sitting next to her dropped her program. Amber enrolled at the same school the following year, tuition paid in full by our grandfather Frank, a retired civil engineer on my dad's side who had a big heart and an even bigger soft spot for Amber, who laughed at all his jokes and always made him feel like the most important person in the room. Amber dropped out after 2 semesters. Said the major she'd picked wasn't really her thing. She moved back home, met Tyler Weston at 25, married him at 28, had a little girl named Chloe at 31, and hadn't held a job in 3 years by the time this story takes place. My parents never once said a word about the difference between how we came up. They didn't have to. The family had already decided what each daughter was for, so long ago that nobody even remembered making the decision. Amber was the one you took care of. I was the one who took care of herself. And despite everything, the holidays nobody announced, the milestones nobody asked about, the dinners where they talked about Chloe's preschool for 40 minutes and never once asked how my job was going, I still showed up. Every Thanksgiving. Every Christmas. Every time someone needed an extra set of hands or a second opinion. I drove 5 hours from Austin to Flagstaff and back over and over like being reliable enough for long enough would eventually teach them to see me. It didn't. And it took a hotel lobby in Sedona to finally make me understand why. Mom called me in July, right in the middle of the Texas heat when the parking lots in Austin shimmered like they were melting. "We're doing a family trip," she said. Amber found this beautiful resort in Sedona. Red Rocks Spa, a gorgeous pool. Third week of October. The leaves and the canyon colors are going to be perfect. She said, "We're doing a family trip," the same way she said everything, like the logistics had already handled themselves and I was just being filled in on my part, which I usually was. I asked about the room situation. "Your father's handling the reservations," she said. I texted my dad that night. "Dad, am I in room 1 or room 2? He replied an hour and a half later. "All handled. Don't stress." I believed him. I booked 3 days off work, the first real time off I'd taken since a quick trip to New Orleans the year before. I packed hiking boots, a novel I'd been saving, and a bottle of Tempranillo I'd been holding onto since a work trip to California. I was going to open it with my mom on the resort terrace and watch the sun go down on the red rocks. I had the whole thing pictured. Amber and me walking a trail with little Chloe between us, the 3-year-old sneakers kicking up red dust. Dad with a book in a chair. Mom ordering way too much food at dinner and all of us laughing about it. Normal family stuff. The stuff I kept auditioning for. I drove out early Friday morning, windows down through the Texas Hill Country, then the desert spreading out flat and wide before Sedona appeared out of nowhere, those rust-red formations rising up like the earth was showing off. Even if you've seen pictures, the real thing still stops your breath for a second. I pulled into the resort at 2:30 in the afternoon. Beautiful place. Adobe-style buildings, turquoise accents, the smell of desert sage, and something warm I couldn't quite name. I walked to the front desk where a young woman named Jasmine smiled at me, typed my name, looked again, and gave me the smile I described at the very beginning of this story. 2 rooms. No Serena. I called my mom. You already know what she said. I was still at the counter when the automatic doors slid open behind me and a small voice shouted, "Grandma!" and 3-year-old Chloe came sprinting across the marble lobby straight toward the gift shop display, completely unbothered by things like adults or luggage. Amber came in right behind her in new sandals and a linen sundress. Tyler had both their bags and the car seat. She spotted me at the front desk and stopped. Not surprised. Just stopped. The way you stop when you already know the situation and you're deciding how to play it. "What's going on?" she said, loud enough for it to carry. I told her. No room in my name. She picked Chloe up onto her hip and looked me dead in the eye. "We booked rooms for our family," she said. Flat. Carrying. Aimed at the entire lobby. Me, Tyler, and Chloe. Mom and Dad. That's who we planned for. She didn't say I wasn't family. She didn't have to. That sentence did it perfectly by naming everyone who was, and letting the silence where my name should have been do the rest. Tyler smirked. Not a laugh, just that small tilt of the mouth that says I agree but I want to keep my hands clean about it. My mom straightened her sunglasses and studied the floor. My dad stood 6 feet away, phone out, scrolling, physically present and somewhere else entirely. Other people in that lobby had gone still. A couple by the fountain. A family near the elevator. The desk agent whose fingers had frozen over the keyboard. I was standing there with my bag in one hand and 5 hours of highway in my body, and something clicked into place. Not rage. Something colder and cleaner, like a math problem that finally works out after years of coming up wrong. I was surrounded by people who shared my last name, and not one of them had put my name on a door. "I'll head out," I said. Quiet. Even. The voice I use when I'm presenting data I know will be uncomfortable. No crying. No scene. I picked up my bag and walked out. The lobby doors slid open behind me and my mom's voice crossed the parking lot. "Serena, don't turn this into a whole thing. We'll figure something out." I didn't look back. I put my bag in the trunk, got in the car, started the engine, and pulled out with my mom in the rearview mirror. arms at her sides, mouth still moving, standing in front of a resort that had space for the whole family except the one who drove the farthest to get there. Tempranillo was still on the passenger seat, unopened. I drove north on Route 89A through the tourist stretch of Sedona, bumper to bumper on a Friday in October, every rental car in the state apparently trying to look at the same red rocks at the same time. I kept both hands on the wheel and my phone face up on the center console, buzzing like it was alive. Mom. Amber. Dad. Mom again. Amber again. I didn't answer. I just drove. 20 minutes north, the traffic thinned out. The formations pulled back. The desert went quiet. I found a small inn outside Cottonwood called the Verde Valley Lodge, 2 stories, white paint, hand-lettered sign, a woman at the front desk named Ruth with reading glasses on a chain and a paperback open on the counter. Just you, hon? Just me. She gave me room 9. Ground floor. Window facing a small courtyard with a mesquite tree and a fountain that made exactly the sound you want when you're trying to get your thoughts to slow down. $84 a night. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone. 31 missed calls. 14 texts from my mom charting her emotional journey from annoyed to self-righteous to silent. This is ridiculous. You're ruining the trip. Call me back. Amber is upset. And then, about 20 minutes after the last one, fine. Do what you want. I read them twice. I wasn't looking for an apology. I'd given up expecting those a long time ago. I was looking for awareness. One sentence where somebody put the weight where it actually belonged. Something like, "We should have booked your room." Or, "Amber shouldn't have said that in the lobby." There was nothing. Every single message was about my reaction, my leaving, my attitude, my refusal to come back and absorb everything with a smile like I always had. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. I opened the Tempranillo, poured it into a plastic bathroom cup, sat on the floor with my back against the bed, and listened to that courtyard fountain while the sky outside went from orange to red to dark. I drank wine alone in a room that cost $84. My sister's new sandals had cost more than that. My mom's sunglasses had cost more than that. The fountain didn't care about any of it. That was honestly the most comforting thing I'd heard all day. If you've ever sat alone in a cheap room while your family moved on without you and didn't even notice, you know exactly what that night felt like. Stay with me. Because the text my dad sent the next morning? That changed everything. I woke up at 7:14 Saturday morning to sunlight across the floor and a text from my dad. "Mom thought you could come back and use the pull-out in Amber's suite. It's a big room. We really shouldn't have to book a separate bed for someone who doesn't bring anyone." I read it once. Read it again. Set the phone on the windowsill and looked at the mesquite tree in the courtyard. Someone who doesn't bring anyone. Not, "We made a mistake." Not, "We should have planned for you." 34 years of working my way through school on my own, of building a career from the ground up, of showing up for every birthday and every holiday without ever being asked. And my dad had just reduced all of it to whether or not I had a husband sleeping next to me to justify the cost of a room. I took a screenshot. Filed it away. Didn't respond. That afternoon I called Priya. She's been my best friend since college, an ER doctor in Phoenix now, still the same person who picks up on the second ring and doesn't waste time on small talk. "Talk," she said. I could hear the hospital behind her. I told her everything. The lobby. Amber's voice. My mom calling me dramatic in the parking lot instead of apologizing. My dad's text. The math of 31 missed calls that added up to exactly 0 acknowledgement. Priya listened the way she always does, completely without jumping in. When I was done, she was quiet for about 4 seconds. Then, "How long are you going to drive 5 hours to prove you belong to people who won't even save you a seat?" She wasn't being harsh. Priya doesn't do harsh. She was being accurate, and accurate doesn't leave you anywhere to hide. I sat on the edge of the bed in room 9 and didn't say anything for a while. "I don't know," I finally said. "Yes, you do," she said. "That's the problem. After we hung up, I opened my notes app and typed 2 headings: what I need, what I've been accepting. First list came fast. To be planned for. To have my name on something. To be in the photograph. To be asked how I'm doing without someone needing a favor first. The second list filled up faster. The holidays I found out about last. The wedding setup I did alone and never got thanked for. Texts that only had my name when something needed to be carried or picked up or handled. The dinner conversations that lasted 40 minutes about Chloe and wrapped up without a single question about me. I sat there looking at both lists and I saw it clearly for the first time. This wasn't forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is random. What I was looking at had a pattern. I was included when there was work to do and left out when belonging was being handed around. And that pattern was so old, so built into how the family operated that everyone inside it, including me, had stopped noticing it was happening. I was the person my family called when something needed doing. I was not the person they called to check on. Let me tell you about 2 things that happened before Sedona because they belong here and I should have connected the dots sooner. 3 years before the resort trip, I drove 5 hours from Austin to Flagstaff in a December ice storm. The highway through the mountains was brutal, blowing snow, black ice patches, salt trucks every couple miles. I got to my parents' house that afternoon carrying 4 gifts I'd spent weeks finding. A silk scarf for my mom in the exact shade of teal she always pointed out. A high-end tackle box for my dad because he'd been complaining about his old one all summer. A stuffed elephant for Chloe because she'd been obsessed since her 2nd birthday. And for Amber, a leather planner because she'd mentioned wanting to get more organized. We opened presents after dinner. Amber went first. She always went first. My parents gave her a gold bracelet with small diamonds along the band. The whole production, velvet box, my mom holding Amber's wrist up to the lamp so the stones caught the light, Tyler filming it. Amber's face doing that thing where joy and expectation are impossible to tell apart. Then Amber reached into a bag and handed me a candle. White. Still in the drugstore bag. I turned it over and saw the clearance sticker on the bottom. $3.99. My mom saw me looking at the sticker. I honestly wasn't sure what you'd like, she said, bright and unbothered. I said thank you. I smiled. I drove home the next day with that candle on the passenger seat. I have never burned it. It lives on a shelf in my apartment behind some books where I don't look at it, but I always know it's there. And then there was Amber's wedding 2 years before Sedona. Big venue in Scottsdale, 200 guests, a string quartet playing during the ceremony. I was not a bridesmaid. Amber had told me 6 months out gently, the way you deliver bad news to someone you don't fully respect. We didn't want to burden you with the dress cost. The dress was $260. 1 day's pay for me. But Amber chose her college best friend as maid of honor and 2 of Tyler's cousins to round it out, and I sat 3 rows back between an elderly neighbor I'd never met and a man I later found out was Tyler's dentist. Nobody told me about the rehearsal dinner until the day before. I found out through a text in the family group chat that appeared mid-conversation, like I'd been included from the start and simply hadn't been paying attention. But I was the one who showed up at the venue at 6 in the morning to help set up. I carried folding tables across a gravel lot. I arranged centerpieces for 2 hours. I stayed until midnight cleaning up, stacking chairs, sweeping, loading gifts into Tyler's brother's truck. Tyler's brother, a little loose from the open bar, leaned against the tailgate and grinned at me. "You're basically the hired help, huh?" He was kidding. It didn't feel like a joke. I drove back to Austin the next morning. No thank you text. Not that day. Not ever. Sunday morning, still at the lodge in Cottonwood, I woke up to Amber's Instagram post. A whole carousel. The resort pool against the red rocks, Chloe eating waffles at brunch, my parents on the terrace watching the sunset, a group shot of everyone with their arms around each other and the canyon glowing behind them. Caption: grateful for the people who matter most. 200 and something likes. Dozens of comments. Heart emojis from cousins, friends, neighbors. Not one person asked where I was. Because the photos told a complete story, and the story didn't have a gap where I should have been because I had never been framed into it. My cousin Danielle noticed, though. She's 3 years older than me, lives in Tucson, teaches high school. She texted me that evening. "Hey, you're not in any of these photos. Everything okay?" I hadn't told anyone except Priya. Saying it out loud meant admitting how much it hurt, and I wasn't ready to carry someone else's reaction on top of my own. But Danielle had asked directly. And Danielle is family in the way that word is supposed to actually mean something. So I told her. Just the facts in order. The rooms. The lobby. Amber's voice in front of the other guests. My dad's text. Her replies came in 3 quick messages, like doors being pushed open one after another. That night, Danielle called our grandfather Frank. And that is where this story turns. Frank Harmon was 79 years old. Tired civil engineer. Widower, my grandmother Helen had passed 3 years earlier. He lived alone on 5 acres outside Sedona, about 45 minutes from the resort where my family was staying without me, with a workshop out back where he still built things with his hands just to give them something useful to do. He drove himself to the hardware store every Saturday and still called it getting supplies. I'd been planning to visit him after the Sedona trip like I always did. We'd sit on his back porch, drink coffee out of Helen's old cups, and talk about whatever. His latest project, my work, things we remembered about her. He was one of the only people in my family who asked follow-up questions. He called me Monday morning while I was still at the lodge. Danielle told me what happened. His voice was the same as always, steady, no wasted words, the voice of a man who'd spent 40 years on job sites making structural decisions and learned that staying calm is a form of strength. "Are you all right?" I told him the basics. Kept it to the facts. Frank doesn't need the emotional color. He needs the information. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. I could hear the desert whine through his phone. "Your grandmother would have done exactly what you did," he said. She would have picked up her bag and walked out. He invited me to dinner that Wednesday before I headed back to Austin. I drove out to his place on winding 2-lane roads through juniper and scrub, the red formations rising and dropping on either side. His house was at the end of a gravel drive, Helen's rose bushes still blooming along the fence line, still maintained like she'd just stepped out. He made green chili stew from scratch. We ate at the kitchen table where he still did his taxes by hand. After dinner, he leaned back and started asking questions, specific, pointed, like he was checking the numbers on a project that had been running without oversight. How long had Tyler been in sales? What were his commissions actually like? What did my dad do at the company he called his job? I answered honestly. Frank looked past my shoulder for a moment. Then he looked at me. "I have been sending your parents $4,500 a month for the past 10 years, he said. And Amber and Tyler have been getting another $3,500 every month to cover what they can't cover on their own. I set my fork down. Do the math with me for a second. $1,000 a month. 10 years. That's close to $1 million, $960,000 to be exact, quietly going into bank accounts and covering mortgages and car payments and credit cards and lifestyle choices every single month without any of us younger ones knowing it existed. I didn't know, I said. Nobody does. Just them. And now you. He looked at me directly. How much have I sent you? Nothing, I said. I never asked. He nodded. Twice. Like he'd been waiting years for that answer to be confirmed out loud. I know you never asked, he said. He stood up, carried his plate to the sink, and told me over his shoulder that he was hosting Thanksgiving this year. The whole family. First time in 5 years. I dried a dish and waited. Some things need to be said out loud, he said. In a room with the right people in it. I drove back to Austin the next day and sat with that for a long time. The weeks between Sedona and Thanksgiving were quiet. Not dramatically quiet, just the ordinary quiet of someone who has stopped performing. I stopped calling first. Stopped volunteering before being asked. Stopped apologizing for my schedule when it bumped up against plans I hadn't been part of making. Small shifts, almost invisible from the outside. But inside they felt enormous, like I'd finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be mine. My mom called in mid-November. Her voice was softer than usual, not warm exactly, just turned down the way people talk when they want to say something hard without it actually costing them anything. "I know you're still bothered about the trip." "I'm not bothered, Mom. I'm clear." She didn't like that answer. I heard her shift on the couch. Amber gets wound up. You know how she is. Chloe's been difficult lately, and Tyler's hours at the dealership got cut, and she's carrying a lot right now. We just try to keep things running smoothly. I let her talk. Then she said, "I worry about what happens if your grandfather ever decides to stop helping. I really don't know how we'd manage." Her voice went quieter. Real fear underneath the performance. A woman who had never financially supported herself, whose whole life was built on an arrangement she'd never had to think about because it had always just been there. That fear was real. I held it for a moment. Then she finished. "That's why it's just easier when everyone goes along." There it was. Her fear was real. Her conclusion was the same as always. Keep things smooth by asking the one who never complains to keep absorbing. "You kept the peace by leaving me out," I said. "That wasn't fair." Neither was walking out. She hung up first. The family group chat came back to life a week before Thanksgiving. Mom, acting like Sedona had never happened, posted a cheerful message about the holiday at Frank's. Turkey emoji. Heart emoji. Who's bringing what? Amber responded within minutes. She'd bring wine. Mom assigned the sides. And then, "Serena, can you bring your sweet potato casserole? Everyone always loves it." I stared at that message for a solid minute. Left out of a resort trip. Told by my own sister that I wasn't part of the real family. Told by my dad I wasn't worth a separate bed because I didn't bring anyone. And 6 weeks later, "Can you bring the dish?" Everyone loves it. They had moved right past Sedona the way water moves past a rock, around it, over it, forgetting it the moment the current pulled them forward. And they expected me to do the same because I always had. I typed back, "I'll be there." No emoji. No, can't wait. Just, "I'll be there." They read compliance. They saw the Serena who always shows up, always brings the dish, always makes it work. They didn't see the screenshot still saved on my phone. Meanwhile, the truth was moving through the family the way truth does when it finally gets out. Not as gossip, just as facts being passed between people who still believed facts mattered. Danielle had told Aunt Loretta. Loretta was Frank's older sister, 76 years old, sharp as a thumbtack, the kind of woman who had never in her life let go of something she believed was wrong. She called me 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. "I heard about Sedona. Is it true?" "Yes, ma'am." Long pause. "Your grandmother would have been heartbroken. She was going to be at Thanksgiving. Danielle was going to be at Thanksgiving. And Frank had said, some things need to be said out loud in a room with the right people." I drove to the Sedona area the day before the holiday, but I didn't stay at my parents' place. I booked a room at a motel outside Cottonwood, same general area I'd been in after leaving the resort. Another small, deliberate decision. A line I'd drawn without making an announcement about it. Thanksgiving morning, I drove to Frank's place before 8. The desert in late November is stripped back and quiet, the red rocks sharper against a sky that has gone to winter gray at the edges. His house smelled like green chili and wood smoke and the combination of things I've always associated with feeling like myself. He was already in the kitchen when I arrived, making a sweet potato dish from an index card in Helen's handwriting, taped to the fridge with a magnet she'd bought at a craft fair 15 years ago. He handed me a coffee without being asked. We set places for 21. Helen's plates, white with a thin gold rim. Frank polished the silverware at the sink himself, the way he'd done it every year she was alive. Guests started arriving at 11. Aunt Loretta came first, her grandson Marco driving her. Danielle came with a pecan pie. Two of Frank's old colleagues from his engineering days, men in their late 70s who still called him Frankie and shook hands like they were testing load capacity. Aunt Rachel, Danielle's mom. A neighbor couple. And then, in the second wave, my family. My parents' car. Mom carrying a casserole, Dad with his hands in his pockets. And behind them, Amber in a new caramel-colored coat, Tyler in a blazer, and Chloe running straight past everyone toward the corner where Frank kept an old drafting stool she liked to spin. Amber hugged Frank with both arms and all the warmth she could project. Tyler shook his hand. My mom rearranged something on the counter. My dad glanced at me and looked away. Dinner was the way good Thanksgiving dinners are supposed to be, loud in layers, smelling like things that took all day, people leaning across the table to hear each other. Frank said grace from the head of the table. For the food, the family, and for truths that make it to the surface. Amen. 21 people said amen. Amber held the table for most of the meal. She's a natural storyteller, knows how to fill a room, how to make people lean in. She told the Sedona stories. Trail where Chloe collected rocks. The unbelievable brunch. Tyler's early morning jog where he swore he saw a coyote. She told them like she owned every detail. Then she lifted her wine glass. I want to make a toast, she said, and the table quieted. To family. To the people who actually show up for each other, no matter what. She looked at me when she said, show up. Half a second. Maybe less. But long enough. Aunt Loretta set her fork down. I raised my glass for the toast. Then I put it back on the table without drinking. The wine sat there untouched, and the silence between me and that glass said more than anything I could have added. After the main course, while the table relaxed into smaller conversations, Amber floated something casual. Grandpa Tyler's been eyeing this truck, one owner, really clean. And we've been talking about maybe finding a little lake house, something the whole family could use. Tyler picked it right up. Under 40,000 miles. Great deal. They put these things out into the room like balloons, watching to see who reached for them. Frank ate his sweet potato and said nothing. I got up to clear some plates. I'd barely made it to the kitchen when Amber appeared in the doorway, pulling it mostly closed behind her. Are you going to be like this all night? She said low. Like what? You've barely said 10 words. You're making everyone uncomfortable. I'm fine, Amber. You walked out in Sedona. That was your call. Because there was no room. You would have figured something out. Her jaw tightened. You always do. There it was. The whole operating system of our family in one sentence. Serena figures it out. Serena doesn't need us to handle things for her. Serena handles herself, which means we don't have to handle Serena. I set my dish towel on the counter. I looked at my sister in her new coat with her hand on the doorframe. I didn't say anything. I walked back to the table. Dessert. Frank's lemon chess pie. His own recipe, one he'd never written down or shared with anyone, which meant it appeared at every Thanksgiving like something you could never take for granted. Table had loosened up the way it does after a big meal. Voices a little louder than intended. Guards down. Which is exactly when Amber decided to tell the story. She leaned toward Danielle and Aunt Rachel like she was sharing something fun, but her voice carried. It always carried. I mean, honestly, the whole Sedona thing was just, Serena made this whole scene at the front desk and then just walked out. Like, out to the parking lot. Gone. She made a vanishing gesture. Tyler and I were completely blindsided. She laughed a little. Not meanly, the laugh you attach to a story you've already decided is yours to tell. She's always been like this, Tyler said, half to the room. Any time the attention shifts. She didn't have a room. Aunt Loretta. Not loud. She didn't need to be. The table went quiet in sections, like a ripple moving from her end toward Amber's. There was no room booked for Serena, Loretta said. Your family planned the trip, reserved rooms for themselves, and left her name off everything. Amber's expression shifted fast. It was a misunderstanding. Was there a room? Loretta looked at my parents. Was Serena's name on anything? My mom looked at the tablecloth. My dad picked up his coffee cup and put it back down without drinking. The silence that followed lasted just long enough for every person at that table to understand what it meant. I hadn't planned to speak. But the room had gone completely still in the way rooms go still right before something shifts. Danielle's eyes on me, Loretta's chin up, Aunt Rachel's hands folded, and I looked down the table to Frank, who met my eyes and gave me one small nod. Not permission. Just I'm right here. I set my coffee cup on the saucer. The soft clink carried. Amber, I said. You're right. I left. 21 people went still. What you're leaving out is that there was no room booked for me. I paused for 2 beats. You stood in that lobby in front of other guests and made it clear who counted as family and who didn't. I heard you. People at the next check-in counter heard you. The desk agent heard you. I looked at my dad. And the next morning, Dad, you texted me. You said Mom wanted me to share Amber's pullout. And then you wrote, and I have the screenshot, we really shouldn't have to book 2 rooms for someone who doesn't bring anyone. I let that sentence sit in the middle of the table like something physical. My mom's hand went to her mouth. My dad looked at his plate. Danielle had closed her eyes. Aunt Rachel stared at my parents with an expression I'd never seen on her before. Amber stood up so fast her chair scraped the hardwood. Are you serious right now? You are going to sit at Grandpa's Thanksgiving table and do this? You walked out, that was your choice. You drove away like a teenager, and now you're here trying to flip the whole story in front of everyone. Amber. Frank's voice. Just her name. She stopped. Frank stood up. Slowly. Both hands on the table first, then rising to his full height. The unhurried movement of a man who understood that when he stood up, the room paid attention and he didn't waste it. I built my career from nothing, he said. 40 years. Started as the youngest guy on somebody else's crew and worked until I was the one running the jobs. I never borrowed what I couldn't pay back, and I never built anything I couldn't stand behind. He looked around the table. His old colleagues. Loretta, Danielle and Rachel. All the people who had known him long enough to understand what was being said. I had been sending $8,000 a month to this family for 10 years. Your mortgage, Amber. The salary your father draws from a job that was designed around him. Chloe's college fund. Cars. Credit card balances. Every month, 10 years, no questions asked. He let it sit. Not one person who has received that money has built a single thing with it. Table did not breathe. Then he looked at me. The only one in this family who never once asked me for anything, he said, turned out exactly like her grandmother. He sat back down. Picked up his fork. Amber, he said quietly. Eat your pie. Amber did not eat her pie. They were gone in under 20 minutes. Tyler grabbed coats. Amber got Chloe from the living room. The little girl had been playing with Frank's old drafting stool the whole time, completely untouched by everything that had happened at the table. My mom tried to say something to Frank at the door. He thanked her for the dish she'd brought and held it open. I was rinsing cups at the sink when Amber appeared one last time in the kitchen doorway. Chloe on her hip, face tucked into her shoulder. Amber's voice was shaking. Do you understand what you just did? He's going to cut us off because of this. You know that? Because you sat there and played the victim, he's going to stop everything. I turned off the faucet. Dried my hands. I didn't ask him to do anything, Amber. You didn't have to. You just had to sit there looking sad and let everyone feel sorry for you. I told the truth, I said. in front of people who needed to hear it. The same way you told yours, in a lobby full of strangers. She opened her mouth, reached for something, found nothing. She picked up her bag and walked out. Tyler followed without a word. The other guests left in ones and twos. Aunt Loretta pressed her hand to my cheek before she went out. Danielle held onto the hug for a long time. Frank's colleague shook his hand at the door with the quiet understanding of men who've watched hard calls get made and know how to honor one. I sat on Frank's back porch in the cold, watching the stars the way you can only watch them in the desert, so many and so clear they make you feel like the right size for once. The light was on in the workshop. Frank had gone in there after the guests left, doing what he does when he needs to work with his hands more than his thoughts. The screen door opened. My dad came out in his coat, keys already in hand. My mom was waiting in the car. I could make out her shape through the windshield. He stood at the porch rail with his back to me. "I shouldn't have sent that text," he said. "No," I said. "You shouldn't have. I didn't mean it the way." "Dad, you typed it. You pressed send. You didn't call me 5 minutes later to take it back." He scraped his shoe against the boards. The same thing Chloe does when she knows she's done something wrong and is waiting to see how bad the consequence will be. "Are you going to be okay?" I looked out at the saguaros standing dark against the sky. Rocked the chair once. "I've been okay for 34 years without a room, a spot in the photo, or a seat that anyone saved for me," I said. "I'll keep being okay." He stood there a moment longer, waiting, I think, for something I didn't have to give him right then. Then he went down the steps, crossed the gravel, and got in the car. I watched the headlights sweep the driveway and disappear around the bend where the desert closed back in. 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, the transfers stopped. Frank didn't send a letter or make a call. December came and the $8,000 that had shown up every month for 10 years, split between my parents and Amber's household like a utility bill nobody ever looked at, simply wasn't there. January didn't come either. No warning. No explanation. Just silence where there had never been silence before. And then things started to move. Amber and Tyler listed their house in January. The Scottsdale mortgage had always been bigger than Tyler's dealership commissions could actually cover, and without Frank's monthly top-up, the math became impossible fast. They moved to a smaller rental in Tempe. Tyler started picking up weekend shifts. Amber got a job at a home goods store, her first in 3 years. She called me in February. Not to apologize. Not to fight. Just to ask how to put together a resume. I sat at my kitchen table in Austin and walked her through it on speaker. Work history, skills, how to frame the years she'd been home as household and family management. I helped her because that's who I am. And because helping my sister with a resume didn't mean I had to pretend the lobby never happened. My parents downsized too. The 4-bedroom house in Flagstaff went on the market in March. They moved to a 2-bedroom apartment. My dad found a real position, operations manager at a community college, actual hours, actual work. He was 61 and starting from scratch. I won't pretend I felt nothing watching that happen. But what I felt wasn't satisfaction. It was something harder to name, a kind of complicated sadness for people who had spent decades standing on a floor they never had to build and were now finally touching the ground for the first time. My mom texted me in February. Short. No preamble. "I'm sorry about Sedona. I'm sorry about more than that." First time she had ever typed that word to me. In 34 years. I waited 2 days. Then I replied, "I know, Mom." The door stayed open. Not wide the way it used to be, not the version where I absorbed everything without naming it, but open. Carefully. With intention. Danielle and I started talking every week. Easy conversations, her students, my projects, things we both remembered about Helen. It turned out we had the same memory of her. She always asked the follow-up question. Whatever you told her, she always wanted to know what came next. And Frank. Frank became the fixed point. Every other Saturday, driving out to the desert, sitting on his back porch, coffee in Helen's cups, the red rocks doing whatever they did with the light that day. Spring came and the saguaros put out their white blooms and the desert smelled like something I'd never found a name for but had always recognized as belonging here. One Saturday in April I pulled up and he was already on the porch with 2 cups poured. I sat in the second chair. The one that had always been there, always waiting. We watched the desert and drank our coffee and didn't need to fill the quiet. "You know what I used to tell my crew on a tough job?" he said eventually. "Tell me. Don't judge the build by how it looks when conditions are perfect." He looked out at the rocks. "Judge it by what's still standing after the hard weather comes through." I held the warm cup in both hands. "You were still standing," he said. Simply, accurately. Here's what I want to leave you with, because it's the hardest part to say and also the most important. I spent 34 years believing that if I showed up enough times, helped enough times, made myself useful enough, my family would eventually see what I was worth. I thought you could earn your place in a family by never missing a holiday and never asking for anything. But here's what I know now: belonging isn't a reward for good behavior. It's something a family gives you before you have to ask. It's a name on a reservation. A chair with your name on it. A photo where somebody thought to say, "Wait, let's get everyone in this one." If you've been the dependable one, the one who drives the long way, sets up the chairs, stays to clean up, and never makes a fuss, and you've started feeling invisible inside the family that's supposed to know you best, I want you to hear this. Your reliability was never your weakness. People who took it for granted, that was theirs. The quiet revenge isn't walking out of a lobby, though sometimes that's exactly the right move. The real revenge is building a life so full and so yours that no one's approval can touch the foundation. It's the 2 cups of coffee on a porch with someone who finally asks the follow-up question. A hotel front desk. A Thanksgiving table. A grandfather who stood up. Some truths don't need drama. They just need a room with the right people in it. If this story hit close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your city in the comments, I read every single one. And subscribe to Silent Revenge because the next story is already waiting and it goes even deeper than this one. I'm Serena. And I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.